Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Friday, October 31st, 2025, and today we are going to be talking about the United States of America and the future of the redistricting process, as a Republican group now warns their own political party that they might be slow-walking to an inevitable defeat after the 2030 census redraw and as well as the upcoming elections, where Democrats seem to be doing better than Republicans at their own game at redrawing congressional districts across the country. The GOP group that raised the alarm bells here, a new memo that was obtained by Politico. It's quite interesting. It comes from the Republican State Leadership Committee, responsible for a lot of conversations around the state legislative level, a lot of conversations around who's governing each individual state. And what they essentially say here is a massive warning sign to the GOP that down-ballot elections are essential for Republicans for the next few years, if not indefinitely, as the GOP looks to this continuous struggle for drawing maps differently and in favor of either political party. What this long-winded memo essentially says is that the Republicans are on track to have the Democrats, who have now started pushing back in states like California with Proposition 50, in states like Virginia, where today the Virginia State Senate has now approved the redistricting amendment across the state. What we know is that the Democratic Party in a lot of these states feels very personally attacked by what the Republicans have been doing across the country. They see states like Texas and Missouri and North Carolina, among many others, that are pursuing redraws, some of which have already pursued redraws for their congressional maps here. And what it essentially has done has made it so the Republicans have gained seats across the country and Democrats have lost seats. Now, the GOP group isn't worried about Republicans, redrawing Texas or Missouri or North Carolina, that it would backfire on the Republicans in those states. They're much less concerned to that degree about what we've seen across those states, but rather is more concerned about a Democratic response, arguing that if they ignore these state races, which it looks like Republicans might be giving up some gubernatorial races in 2022, depending on 2026 rather, depending on the nominees, might be giving up some state legislative races given the circumstances of the environment. I mean, what this group essentially is saying is that Democratic authority in a lot of these states allows them to push back against what Republicans have been doing across the country and will allow Democrats to draw their own versions of their maps, essentially nullifying what Republicans are trying to do. And so they say pretty much, a lot of BS about, different states, what matters here, the individual majorities, why it makes a difference. But if we're being very blunt about why this is even, in consideration in the first place, the big reason for it is that Republicans just simply don't want Democrats to have the ability to push back against them in these states. I think when they saw Virginia come through, this was, floated a week ago, October 23rd was when we saw the news break in Virginia. I highly doubt any Republicans thought that this might be coming. I mean, they knew the Democrats had a majority here, but there's a Republican governor in Virginia. The majorities for the Democrats are just one seat in the state house and 2 seats in the state senate. It never really made that much sense that you could even find, 100% of Democratic agreement on this, but the Virginia Democratic Party found it. And they used that authority and an upcoming election that's set to take place in just 4 days that will likely usher in a Democratic governor and even more expansive Democratic majority in the House of Delegates to really capitalize on the moment and pressure these legislators to move forward in favor of the Democratic Party. And so we saw that they did. Now, the Virginia State Senate passing it, I think, is the final step here before we go to see it pass again after the election set to take place in January. I mean, this is pretty much a guarantee that it's going to happen. The state Senate's not going to change in composition, and Republicans are certainly not going to win the Virginia House of Delegates. It's a very slim chance that that happens at all, and their odds at winning any of the 3 races have arguably gotten a lot smaller, save the Attorney General's race, which are probably at even odds. But even then, the Attorney General is currently a Republican who tried to go to the Virginia courts, went to a conservative part of the state to try to find a Republican judge who says, this is fully legal, and there's not much I can do to stop it, even if I don't agree with it on a partisan level. And so as we see other states start to take up this idea that they may be redrawing as well, Illinois is having that conversation right now with a lot a lot of different Democrats across the state who are currently holding out. They have until November 3rd, which is Monday. So we might see, a delaying of the filing deadline if Democrats are serious about taking it up. But the real answer here is that, what we're seeing is that Democrats are willing to go to these states and try to make a difference. They're willing to push back against the Republicans who are very terrified that Democrats would do onto them as they were willing to do to the Democrats. That Democrats in their newfound after 2026, potentially trifectas in some of these states, might pursue a congressional redraw because that's what Donald Trump has taught them is appropriate. I mean, when you think about where Republicans might be the most concerned about a new map, you have to think about states like Pennsylvania, where Republicans currently have a 10-7 advantage, but this map in 2022 was roughly about even. Okay, it was about 9-8. In 2020, it was 9-9. Nearly perfect for the state. It made a lot of sense. But in the event, for instance, that, Democrats get enough of a legislative advantage in the state of Pennsylvania sometime between now and the next census redraw, it's possible Democrats could take away 3 seats from the Republicans. A great example of a state that hasn't been tapped into yet is the state of New York. Democrats have the ability to do it, and unless Republicans stop them in the 2026 elections, Democrats will have the ability to redraw the map for 2028, and given the new appointments to the New York State Court of Appeals, it is very possible that it gets through. And it's very possible that the Democrats expand their congressional delegation from 19 maybe to 20, 21, or even 22, effectively reducing Republican seats across the state. We see it here in a state like Maryland, where now the only person holding out is the leader of the Maryland State Senate because Democrats have the ability to draw out this first district. The point is that what we have seen across these states is that Democratic resistance has been far more powerful than it was ever meant to be. California was never set to have a mid-decade redraw, and Republicans had a fighting chance at winning some of these districts from the Democrats. Had the election just gone 5 points to the right, Republicans would have, roughly a fourth of all of the seats in California. After this redraw, it might not even crack a 10th. And that's really why you see that, Democrats fighting fire with fire really is so terrifying to the Republican Party. Because the Democratic Party of 2018 would certainly not have redrawn their maps to match what the Republicans were doing. Even back then, Donald Trump didn't even try because the Republican Party wasn't even willing to do so. But because we've reached a new day and age in politics where, it is simply politics above all for both political parties. I think Democrats are buying into it because Republicans have forced their hand as much on it. I think what it shows us is that this is why the Republican Party, again, is so exceptionally terrified of Democrats having any type of control over redraw processes over the next few years. Because they know, and they cite it, that if this happens, Republicans will continue to lose seats across the country. Because they know that their decision to initiate a redraw in Texas has had this domino effect across the country that has only stood to be, only detrimental to both parties and really not gain anyone that much more support. Prop 50 moving forward would never have happened had Republicans not done Texas. But Republicans want it with the double standard. They want to be able to redraw Texas. They want to be able to redraw in North Carolina and Missouri. I mean, if you even saw the Republican response to what Democrats are doing in Virginia, they held this massive press conference arguing against Democrats in Virginia, saying it's wrong, this is incomprehensible, OMG. And then when asked about whether or not Texas was right in their decision to redraw, their answer, well, Texas is a different state. We don't have an opinion on that because they don't want to piss off their Republican colleagues 1,000 miles away in Texas because they don't disagree with it. If they had control and Youngkin was greenlighting it, Republicans would have done it in Virginia too. I guarantee you, right, if they had the ability, they would. Because they have been in almost every single state, save Indiana. Missouri, North Carolina, Texas, they're trying to do it in Florida. I mean, they have been very consistent about these redraws because they had the means to do so. It just so happens in a state where their governor can't do anything. They all of a sudden feel that this is an egregious attempt on Republican politics and Democratic institutions and all these things, but everybody was silent when it came down to Texas. Everybody was silent when it came down to Missouri, when it came down to North Carolina, and even as so far as to seeing The politicians that have come out in support of Proposition 50, I think, really go to show just the extent at which national Democrats are willing to take part in this fight fire with fire initiative that Democrats of 10 years ago would have never dared decide to touch. Kamala Harris making a video in support of Prop 50, Barack Obama issuing ads in support of Prop 50, Cory Booker, Alex Padilla, Adam Schiff, Elizabeth Warren. These are huge names. Ken Martin, the DNC chair, the California Democratic Party. I mean, this is crazy to think about. Gray Davis, Gavin Newsom, obviously, right? A lot of names across California. It is the Republicans who are in opposition to it, but very few Democrats in the state oppose Proposition 50. And when you take a look at those on the yes side, it would have been an entirely different list if this was 2018. If this was Donald Trump's first term, all of these people who were presidential hopefuls would have stayed out of it. They would have been very careful and message tested on this. But what I think a lot of these Democrats are quickly realizing is there is this appetite that simply has not been satisfied yet. That Democrats need to push back against Republicans by any means possible, and Republicans feel it too. This risk here that they talk about, these warnings they are giving the GOP, is that the Democratic Party is waking up to the things that the Republican Party has been doing to them for years on end. After the 2020 census, it is Republicans, not Democrats, who drew the most gerrymanders across the country. Why was that even possible? Because it was in 2010, after that census, that it was the Republicans, not the Democrats, that drew excessive gerrymanders that sustained their power across the country through the end of the decade into the redraw process. And so it's this repetitive thing of, pushing out redraws every single, 10 years to try to sustain itself for 10 years. But just take a look at some of these draws from 2012. Look at this map. I mean, when Republicans ever tell you that they did not initiate this, point them in the direction of the 2010 census and the maps that came about it. Take a look at the way that these maps are drawn. Take a look at Pennsylvania, a state that in this election voted for Obama by a considerable amount by today's standards. I mean, that is a state that in 2012 voted for Barack Obama by 5 points. Trump won it by 1. He won it by 2. Biden won it by 1. Right? This is a close state. Obama blew them out of the water. Even in 2008, this is a state Obama won by 10. When you think about what this House result correlated to, insane. Even the GOP courts had to say, let's get a new one in. Because that's what was fair at the time. 2012, too. I mean, just looking, right? Looking at the way they did a lot of these states. A great example, too, is Missouri, a state that they now are just deciding to axe this 5th district. These things don't happen by accident. Right? These things don't just all of a sudden stumble across and happen to be what happens in these states. No, it is the Republicans who used their authority to draw these maps in a way. Virginia is another great example, an 8-3 map. Are you kidding? Seriously? I mean, this is the map we were working with going. It is insane that there has been any conversation about this not being started by one political party. I get it. Both parties gerrymander. I'm not going to say that they don't. But this idea here that Republicans are trying to say isn't that Democrats are deciding to all of a sudden change the way they're doing it. In acknowledgement here, they talk about Missouri, they talk about North Carolina, they talk about Texas, and they know the Democrats are responding. And it worries them. It shows them that contrasted by 10 years ago, or, looking at the past, you could not have counted on Democrats to do what they are doing today. And I think that it even speaks volumes that a state assembly, a state House delegates, and a state Senate that has slim majorities of 1 and 2 seats in their respective chambers ends up passing this Democratic-led redistricting amendment as something that is not universally agreed upon by the Democratic Party. But it is something that shows that there is an appetite here, and Democrats are trying to satisfy it. Democrats are trying to make these voters on their side feel as if their party is fighting for them. And whether that's at the ballot box, whether that's with congressional redraws, whether that is pushing back against the Republican Party, it all seems to be terrifying this GOP group that is sending this memo to some of the biggest names in Republican politics. And as they make this warning sign, they wave the very big red flag for the GOP. They do so because Democrats are finally fighting back across the country, and they're worried about what it might mean, not just for 2026, but for every other year beyond, where Democrats will remember the same way they were treated today and now by Republicans across the country, and the only way to nullify any type of Democratic response is by winning elections and redrawing them so Democrats can't win their elections. And that's the advice this GOP group has for their own party as they fear a blowout in the 2026 midterms and potentially beyond. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch, a playlist for my 2026 House election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.